Imagine a world where your hands reshape reality. Meet Amy Peck, an XR strategist and the founder of EndeavorVR. I met Amy when we worked together at Leap Motion, a company that pushed the boundaries of technology in hand tracking and virtual reality. In those early days, hand tracking was a puzzle. Capturing the subtleties of human gestures seemed impossible. Leap Motion made this possible, teaching computers to understand the language of our hands, even in the face of occlusion and varying skin tones that may misaligned tracking. Amy's journey with XR didn't end at Leap Motion. Today, she's a consultant. Amy works behind the scenes, advising companies on how to adopt XR, transforming customer experiences, boosting productivity, and reshaping training. Friends, here's Amy Peck. Hey, Amy, how's it going?
Good. It's so good to see you. It's been actually quite a long time since I saw you
It
last.
has. It has. I think the last time we hung out was, I think it was like an art gallery opening for Tony's
Oh, Tony.
partner.
Yeah, Tony Marina Berlin. Yes, downtown in
Yeah, yeah,
like
that's right. That's right.
dog
There was,
patch area. Where was that? It was in San
I think it
Francisco
was a dog patch. Yeah,
by the
it was in
water.
the
Yeah,
dog patch. I think
yeah.
that's, yeah. And of course, we used to work together at Leap Motion,
We did.
the hand tracking company for XR, or before it was really just for the desktop. But we found a really good product market fit with XR, and we've known each other forever, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I do also see you are a very competitive ping pong player because remember we had a team building exercise where it was we were all playing ping pong.
Yeah. I don't know necessarily if I'm great at it, but I do hit some ping pongs, you
Yeah,
know.
it was fun.
Cool. So, thank you so much. It's been a long time, and I'm so grateful for you to being on the show. And fill me in, Amy. What's been going on with you?
As I left Leap Motion, as you know, I started what was then called EndeavorVR that we've now changed to EndeavorXR about 4 years ago. And I've been consulting. I started a consulting firm, and so when I was at Leap Motion with you, and we did start to look at the opportunities in the VR space for hand tracking, which was great. I started to realize because my focus was enterprise, and I started to realize that people were really intrigued by this technology, but they didn't really know what to do with it. And I thought, okay, this is the thing. I think this is the thing. So I jumped off into what I call the abyss of consulting.
Well, the reason why I wanted to speak with you because you have such a unique perspective on building businesses around XR, and that's what you did at Leap Motion. That's a lot of the times that we would work together was finding out specific use cases of why Fortune 500 companies would even use hand tracking, especially in their work pipelines. Going back to the early days, I mean, wow, you remember how difficult and challenging it was to convince people even why virtual reality. And I don't know, are you still having those conversations of educating new clients like why virtual reality, why the metaverse, and we can go into details about what that even means today. Give me your thoughts on that. That might educate the audience.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think on the one hand, there's been a little bit of an evolution, and companies and leaders within companies are starting to understand the technology. But I still spend a lot of time. I think the challenge we're in now is that like all of the technology is moving so quickly. So it's not just XR. First it was VR, then AR, then MR, then XR, and then you have the metaverse, and then now you have AI and you have generative AI. And so all of these technologies are kind of having their, Andy Warhol used to talk about their 15 minutes of fame. And I think we're getting stuck on the flavor of the moment, and we're not thinking in a more kind of global futuristic way. Like, I think we all need to become futurists. I think we need to all project ourselves 25 years into the future and figure out like what are the products and services of the future, and then we use technology to kind of backfill and get us there.
And so, do you think that's your main role in terms of being a consultant in XR is to educate enterprise companies of the value of technology, of what the future technology can bring to their business to be preparing for that future success that these companies need to, actually keep up with technology? Do you think that's kind of encapsulates your role?
Yeah, I think job one is getting people up to speed on the core capabilities of each of the technologies that we look at, because we don't limit ourselves just to XR technology. And then along that same vein is how do we make incremental process optimizations in your business, right? Which we know we can do. But I do think that right now we have to also build a parallel path that is much more futuristic. And this has to be top down. This has to be from the C-suite down, to really start to rethink how we do business, why we're doing some of the things that we're doing. We have the SDGs that we have to consider, and how do we use technology to solve all of these challenges? I mean, it's a lot for anyone to understand. Um, so I like to think of hopefully easily explain the capabilities of the technology. So no matter what level an executive might be at, they can understand what the technology can do and how it can work within their business.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are new to XR or new to technology saying, wow, that seems like such an awesome job, you know? So your main role is to figure out what problems may lie in terms of what technologies can solve with companies can solve with technology and also increase business. And then making sure that there's kind of, in sync involved with not only their mission of trying to use technology to solve a problem, but also bringing in other partners like companies and developers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, what's really interesting now in the industry is that we've gone from having to build pretty much everything from scratch. Which, when I first started my business, I mean, there were a few companies doing VR training, but they were very specific to military or aviation. Um, but what's happened now is over the last almost decade, there are now really great ISVs, independent software vendors, who now have almost fully baked solutions. I think nothing is really off the shelf, but you could fire up, buy a couple of headsets, fire up a software, and have your people in it in that same afternoon, which you couldn't do a decade ago. You really had to think about what level of investment you were willing to make in hiring a team of developers to build you something bespoke.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, today we are in the age of commercial VR where headsets are not duct taped together. Like when we first started getting into the industry,
Much into the
um,
yeah the
things
deep
that that's right, that's right. We would actually literally duct tape Leap Motion devices in front of VR headsets so we can actually try hand tracking in the early days before we actually had a commercial product. But also in the early, developer kit days of Oculus, you know, things just didn't work. 6 degrees of freedom, complete positional hand tracking, anchoring of digital objects in your real environment. Forget about it.
yeah.
We've come a long way. And in terms of that timing, where do you see the current XR landscape today in terms of business interest?
I think there's a lot. I think it's in two camps. I think you have companies that have been kind of ferreting away in their R&D labs. They have a bunch of devices. Some of them are collecting dust. Some of them are in use. And then you have companies that are having a hard time figuring out how to just introduce this level of technology. For example, we talked earlier before we started recording about, I have a podcast on the AEC industry. And that's, you've got some really old school, hard worn, like, field technicians out there in the world. And it's not easy to put headsets on them, or even iPads. It took forever to get them to transition to iPads. And so you really have to make such an exponential improvement in their workflow that they're motivated to overcome the sort of learning challenge of the technology itself. And then in the other camp, the companies that have been looking at this for a while are I think there's an opportunity to really start deploying in significant numbers. And there's a lot of large, F500 companies that have already done that, but not to the degree that we see other hardware, right? Not to the degree that we see the hardware that we use every day, mobile devices and laptops and even workstations. So to get to that, it's it's going to be a longer road because the devices are still big and unwieldy. We're going to laugh at ourselves, wearing these bricks on our faces 10 years from now. We're going to be like, oh my God, that's what I had on my head. And so, we still have a little ways to go. But I'm excited. I think all of the hardware is sufficiently advanced that it's deployable. I think the ISVs and the software that's available is sufficiently advanced that it's deployable. So companies that want to set themselves up for the future, which is the near future, need to really start using this technology and just at the very least build the fluency with it and solve a couple of really obvious problems like in training, see what I see. Some of the things that we know both VR and MR can do very well.
Yeah, you touched upon, a sector or industry that really can benefit from XR, which is AEC, which is architecture, engineering, and construction. And that industry is ripe for innovation, except as you well put it, they're a little old school in terms of adopting new technology, but in terms of efficiency and productivity, wow. For architecture, you can imagine XR doing a lot of visualization. So, I'm sure all the same players that I speak with. They're using VR in their architectural renderings to actually not only view designs, but actually be in the designs themselves. And then engineering, how to improve engineering workflows with doing simulations in XR, and then construction, obviously building and checking out efficiencies or finding more ways to be more productive and actually construction aspects of buildings or different projects. But at the same time, as you mentioned, they're a little bit slow to adopt new technology, and some of these companies, they may even considered adding apps into their workflows just in the last 8 or 10 years, right? What is the kind of word on the street with AEC and their adoption of XR today? I mean, are they a little bit more open to the idea, or are they adopting in a full? I mean, I'm having separate conversations with other companies too that they're very motivated, but I'm not seeing those use cases out to market yet.
Yeah, I think again, it's in two camps. You have companies that are, really, really advanced. They've embraced, BIM, building information modeling. That is a way for them to kind of manage not only the construction life cycle, but then building life cycle management. And then there are others that are kind of, filling little gaps here and there. It's going to be very hard for those companies to keep up to the level that the technology is, especially relative to other companies that have really adopted the technology and are starting to have it trickle down into the field. That's the hardest place. I think if you're in an office or you have a controlled training environment, those are environments that are pretty, relatively easy to deploy. When you start getting into the field where there's, maybe mixed connectivity, maybe there are people who just don't want the technology, like they barely even want to use their iPads. That's where it starts to become challenging, but that's also where some of the biggest benefit occurs. And I've always said, relative to the efficiencies, there's incredible efficiencies in leveraging the technology, especially I always find it odd that they build the as-built after the building is done. Why would you not do that while you're building the building? Like we have wearable LiDAR scanners. I actually have a very funny picture of myself at ITSEC 2 years ago wearing it, looking incredibly glamorous, I might add. But I guarantee you, if you trigger payments to having to, do a LiDAR scan at every, juncture during inspection of a building during the build phase, people will comply. And so that's building in an efficiency, but in some ways you have to push it a little bit by tying payment to it.
That's cool. I mean, just the idea of you in a LiDAR suit is actually really cool. Like
It's actually
with the LiDAR suit, I mean, what's
it's
that?
metal. It's almost like a metal backpack, but it's big, and then it has this
Huh.
like little spaceship on top that is the LiDAR scanner, and it probably weighs, I don't know, 30 pounds, not light, but it's fine. And you kind of put your arms in it and you can walk around and scan. And it's an $80,000 device. It's a company called Naviz that makes it. It's phenomenal. And the point cloud data that the LiDAR is capturing I don't know if you remember in the days like looking at LiDAR, was like they were like awful, pixelated, horrible looking
Yeah,
images.
it was a mess. You couldn't really tell exactly what you
No,
were looking
no,
at. Yeah.
no. And now, the software is so good. Like they look like beautiful renderings, So again, I
Hmm.
think all of it had to just get exponentially better. And now it's moving really quickly. And so there are companies today. I mean, I think that's a great use case, is sort of build your as built while you're building the building, and then you build it once and you deploy kind of across multiple use cases. So for building lifestyle, cycle management, a digital twin is an end-to-end way to manage your building, from optimization to predictive analytics. I mean, the use cases are endless, so it does pay for itself, but it's a significant investment up front.
That's right. That's right. Why haven't we as an industry, especially around BIM modeling, AEC, all these terms that have to do with like construction and architecture, why and that LiDAR use case is awesome. Like that totally makes sense to me, being able to capture your construction while it's being built, so that can like have a whole bunch of data to feed back in terms of the design of why you're actually building this thing. um, why haven't those use cases cropped up yet where, we're reading about these Fortune 500 companies adopting? Is it just because right now it's still a lot of convincing, or in my case, where I'm talking to a lot of companies are just kind of dipping their toes in, building prototypes to see if they can sell it through management and through the board? Um, Tell me about the three main challenges of why we haven't got these mainstream adoptions with bigger companies having these use cases. Or no, there's several of them that have come out that I just don't know about.
I mean, there's a few. I mean, JLL has been doing a lot of work in the space, and a lot of other large companies, but deployments are still relatively small. And I think three challenges. One is still the hardware. So the wearable aspect of the hardware, they're not really that wearable. And the connectivity can be a challenge, especially in a building that's in a much more remote location. And then the economics are, even though on paper we can map out the savings year over year by using this type of technology, because the investment is so high up front, that is a challenge. And there's a lot of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So there's that mentality of like, this is working, we've got a system, it's not perfect, but to disrupt it, I call it kind of the 10x quotient. Like you have to improve it by 10x, whether it's in finances or speed or something that is so astronomically better, right, that they can't ignore it. And so we're still in sort of that 10x mode now. But that's going to start to change, because the companies that are really, really deploying, they're not all really talking about it publicly because they know that this is their competitive advantage in the future.
That's totally right. I think that's also something that I've been hearing as well. A lot of these companies are deploying smaller use cases, prototypes, just to figure out if they can get a competitive advantage. So that was a great point there. Now to talk about, a sea change, Apple Vision Pro. Apple's getting into the mix. And I think that signaled a lot to me because that gave me at least a roadmap of when tens of millions of people might be donning an XR headset. And I know you've been very involved with different developers and ISVs, independent software vendors, who are interested in building XR. What do you think about the new Apple Vision Pro headset?
Well, everybody's very excited about it. We've been waiting for it for a long time. The rumors have been swirling. I personally really wanted it to come out in 2020 for obvious, reasons to 2020 vision. Um, but the fact that Apple's coming in, we know that this is going to be a device that consumers can wear. Is it going to be perfect? No, but they're not going to come out with something that they don't believe is going to be successful in the consumer market. Their marketing has been interesting because there's definitely a consumer component, but there were also nods to this being a device that you can use at work. I've been a big believer in this kind of dual approach because we know that in enterprise, this technology no matter what the device, can solve significant business problems. The ROI is always, almost always double digits. But part of the adoption reason is that we don't really have a connection to these devices in our day to day lives. And so I think that consumer is going to be one of the unlocks for enterprise, mainly because the best people to use technology to solve problems are the people who are in the field, and they solve one problem with the technology. But if they're using it in their day to day lives, they're going to come back to work and go, oh, we can use this for X, Y, Z, and all the way down the line. But until they really understand it and care about it, nothing's going to happen. So that's why I'm excited about it. But I kind of think it's a V3 strategy. V1, primarily developers. V2, early adopters. V3, we'll have content and you'll start to really see, hopefully, consumer uptake.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think in regards to the Apple Vision Pro, they're doing a couple things right that at least send signals to the development community that hand tracking is now, stable enough where Apple is going to be, advertising, promoting that, which was in the early days, we got a lot of jitter when it came to hand tracking. A lot of the technology being used, we were trying to create hand tracking devices that were very inexpensive. So Leap Motion, like we worked on, they captured hand tracking through monochromatic 2D images. And then we had an algorithm to understand what your hands are doing in 3D space. A lot of processing, a lot of things in the background, but it also equated to a lot more mistakes. With hand tracking with Apple Vision Pro, you got a multiple array of cameras, being able to even get small gesture movements, and also eye tracking. Um, some of those features, specifically with eye tracking and hand tracking, have you heard a lot of other, noise around other companies that are really excited to utilize these new commercial features, which have been around forever, but they're now, productized where they actually work? Like, well, what are your thoughts on that? What have you been hearing about other developers?
Well, I think the developers are excited to get in and kind of look at some of the use cases, but from a business perspective, and this is always the developer and client conversation. Developers want to build crazy, amazing experiences. Companies want to solve a problem. Sometimes those two match really well, but a lot of times there are more features than we really need. And again, when you're starting to think about the level of compute, the challenges we have getting these devices up on networks, like we have a lot to overcome in these environments. And one thing I've really found, which is not music to developers' ears, is that less is more. But do a few things really, really well and then save the fun stuff. If you want to put it in and unlock it later, great. But don't tell anyone about it. Make your lives easy. Yeah, because it really is. We find that in general, companies kind of want tried and true right now. And like I said, I think that's not going to change until consumers really care and they start bringing their ideas to work. And in the same way we saw smartphones start to really proliferate, in our personal lives and in our work lives, and we used to have two, and then we had one. Like I see a point at which we need to get to that tipping point where we're going home and we're using these devices, whether it's for entertainment or play or learning, whatever it happens to be, because that understanding and fluency is going to translate into enterprise.
Yeah, and I think with enterprise, it's going to happen first in terms of people understanding the true use cases of why it's beneficial productivity. And the reason why I'm saying that is that right now, even where the headsets, the weight of the headsets today, like the Quest 2 specifically, I can wear it for about a couple of hours without feeling just tremendous strain.
Yeah.
And I sometimes get amazed about people like my nephew, though, who can be in the headset for 24 hours if he was even given the chance to do so, playing Pop One or something. For gaming, I think that immersion for younger audiences, it just kind of fits. They deal with the uncomfortableness because what they gain from the actual entertainment value it outweighs the discomfort. But I think that also applies to someone in productivity. I think that was always the hypothesis that for enterprise, they'll adopt XR because they're trying to solve a problem and they'll deal with the discomfort because of the accolades and the benefits that would come with it. Do you think that's true today, considering where we're at with hardware?
I think it's still a while before, I mean, what we want are magic wafers. I mean, that's just it. And, I think it
Yeah.
was interesting that, you look at the devices that are out on the market today and it was like, all right, how can we build the best device, the best experience with the best fidelity, maintain the, 90, frame rate so that people don't get sick. And then what's the smallest we can make it? Right. And so that it was sort of that working from that direction. And then there was a company that Google bought called Focals by North, which said, all right, we're starting with this. Like they're just going to be regular glasses. And how much can we put in this to maintain this form factor? And what we need those to do, we need both of those to kind of, meet in the middle. And so it'll be interesting to see what Google does. I mean, they have a lot of the HoloLens 2 team are over there. The HoloLens 2 team is now kind of all over, spread among Apple and Meta and Google. So it'll be interesting to see if they kind of come out swinging at any point with a consumer device that is much more like this kind of a wearable. But it's really it's a long road. I mean, we say hardware is hard, but the optics, like Magic Leap has 18 layers of optics, right? And it's a Magic Leap 2 is a stunning device. Like it is an exponential
It's
leap from
beautiful.
from HoloLens 2. But
Mm-hmm.
that's also a device that because of the level of compute, it has a pack, it's tethered. So there's this kind of cause and effect, and so it's possible. And I've had a lot of conversations with people on the hardware side about this, that for the foreseeable future, you'll have one device for kind of a specific lane of jobs, right? And so, like for a Vuzix, for example, or a lighter weight wearable for something in the warehouse where you just need monocular, it doesn't have to be color, it doesn't have to be high fidelity, and you're doing some kind of a rote activity, and it's really just helping you. To all the way to what the military wanted to do with IVAS with HoloLens 2, which was like have this on soldiers to kind of protect them in the field. That did not go all that well, but I like where they're trying to push the technology, right? And so again, it's like, what does the technology, like what hardware do you need with what software? What are you trying to accomplish? And then what is the environment? And that, I think, is going to start to bifurcate the way, like, companies might have 3 or 4 devices for 3 or 4 different lines of business. And that's just the reality for right now, no pun intended.
Yeah, I think what you mentioned regarding North, North was really interesting is that they did design some really awesome technology around glasses, but they marketed it like the glasses were ready. They just look fantastic. They look fashionable. They look cool, and it was a small team that put that together. And then I haven't heard anything since the acquisition. And
No,
have
they've
you
been
heard
very,
anything
very
going
quiet.
on with those?
They've been very quiet.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I can't wait. We can't
Yeah,
wait to. They were just also I remember meeting that. I don't remember who exactly I met from that camp, but they were super fashionable. Like they just had it all like figured out in terms of like, yeah, it's all about style. Like you're not gonna wear ugly,
yeah,
big bulky headsets on
yeah,
your face,
yeah.
and I think we're gonna eventually get to there, but there's gonna be steps, right? Like you had mentioned, until we get smaller form factors. But to your point, we're gonna find specific challenges that are going to be solved with XR, and different headsets or even different technologies will be able to have those as solutions. In terms of technology today, and we didn't touch too much on this, but we talked about this privately. What do you think about this whole idea of metaverse? Is metaverse dead? Is that word just kind of people are just allergic to that word metaverse?
Yeah, yeah. I just did a talk called "The Metaverse is Dead. Long Live the Metaverse." Um, you know, it,
Oh, I want to check that out.
yeah, it. I think that there was, it just fell prey to the hype cycle, and it fell prey to kind of the abject money grab. And then the sort of the confluence of metaverse, Web3, crypto. I'm sorry I did not wear my white puffer today for my when I'm channeling my my inner crypto bro. But the problem is that it was just this abject money grab for everybody. And what was so ironic is that, you have sort of the philosophy of Web3 being, oh, it's decentralized. It's going to be like, power to the people. It's going to, have this equal playing field, which ended up just being nonsense because anyone in that realm was trying to do was create another 1%. It's just now they're in it. So it was like, it didn't make any
Right.
sense to me.
Sure.
Um, and the NFT drops, and I believe in NFTs. I've actually been investing in crypto since like 2015. And I'm a believer in all of these technologies. I'm just not a believer in taking the current ethos of just growth at all costs and the current, this economy of scarcity and applying it in the metaverse, which is an infinite landscape. It doesn't even make sense. So to build this kind of false scarcity. So I think we just, we got kind of duped, and we went down a rabbit hole and followed the white rabbit. And hopefully we'll come up with a more sensible path forward as this digital landscape unfolds around us. And I think Apple has it right is the notion of spatial computing, right? It's not about necessarily a fully immersive environment. It's about taking everything off of our screens and having it live in the world around us and accessible in context to what we want to do, and accessible through gaze, through gesture, through voice, and eventually with the little chips in our heads through thought. In fact, they were issued a patent around an EEG device, in ear that could ostensibly go in a version in the near future that will, measure brainwaves and potentially even be an input device. So we're moving fast into the brain computer interface world as well. So it's all very exciting though. I love it.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I agree in the sense that the definition of the metaverse was just stepped on. I think the ethos of Web3 still stands in the sense that's why I got really into blockchain. Like you, I was in it a long time ago. I don't know if you remember, but we actually accepted Bitcoin on the Leap Motion store. And that's
Oh,
because I worked with Coinbase in the early days
not
to
even.
actually get that integrated. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I don't remember who at Coinbase I was working with, but they actually gave me, I don't even exactly know how much Bitcoin they gave me. I just don't know where that wallet went. I don't even know how much they gave me, but I
Same
always
thing.
kind of think about that.
He's probably got
Yeah, just being able to,
thousands of dollars in Bitcoin buried somewhere and he can't find it.
well, I think that's also one of the main reasons why it hasn't gotten adopted today and why it's gotten such a bad rap that the onboarding and just even the user friendliness of it, like being able to lose your wallet and just kind of forget like
Lose
how much
everything.
money you had, like that's, I think you lose everything already. That's challenging. And secondly, I think the idea of metaverse, the reason why I was so drawn to it was that it was really the ethos of being able to own digital content. Like if we were to have virtual worlds that we can live and work in, we would probably not want to be renters, and we would probably want to own things and customize things that we can take off. But I think that idea alone got twisted. That definition got twisted, and it didn't help that with anything that has a lot of money drawn to it, you're going to attract probably the wrong people. Just like in the early .com days, or I remember, like, all you had to do was write HTML code, and VCs were cutting you checks. And that was the same wave. Like, oh, I actually know how to, code a little bit in any of the blockchain languages today, and you're going to get a check cut out to you. And I think we're in the same situation where we're now trying to walk back from that negative backlash. Do you think we'll ever be able to do it, or do you think this is just a moment in time where we just trying to change the definition, almost like rebranding Twitter to X or like Facebook to Meta? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's an evolution. I think, we're in this kind of gilded world where, we're in technology. So we're all kind of talking to each other about technology, but the rest of the world kind of doesn't care. I mean, they really don't. I mean, you go outside of our little clicky network, people are like, blockchain, what? Metaverse, what? Like it doesn't feel real to them because it doesn't have any day-to-day utility. And, I think we talked a little bit about, the killer app, which is what everybody talks about. And I don't think it's the killer app. I think it's killer utility. What will we use every day? Like when these devices are actually wearable and they, enhance our day to day. So all the stuff that I'm like searching for my phone for, I can just call up and I'm going to like, which direction do I need to go? I need to send a text. Who is this person? They look like they know me, and they're going to say something, and I'm not going to remember their name. And their LinkedIn profile pops up, so that it becomes this seamless part of our day, not unlike the way smartphones did. But hopefully, we have an opportunity to rethink the ramifications also of being tethered to these devices, literally and figuratively, all day, every day.
Yeah, and what does that mean when the perception of being tethered all day is also negative? I mean, we've all seen the movies, and I think rarely where that kind of changes is when we have those use cases where everyone feels empowered. And I think that's the difference between a technology like ChatGPT and generative AI, which AI has been around forever, but generative AI and the way people use it today, people can see instant gratification, and there's not that much of a barrier as long as you know how to get onto a browser. And I don't think we've had that aha moment because we're also tied to a technology that's tethered, and that's, literally you're bringing a headset onto your face and then carrying a compute into your pocket. It may seem a little bit like a leash for some people, and it just seems scary. And I think until we actually have those aha moments where people are using it and saying, "Oh, this is why I use it. I use it to 3D scan, my kids, and I'm able to relive those memories with them later." We're just not at that moment yet. But I do think that, companies, they do find ways to have a competitive advantage. And I especially see that with a lot of companies doing design. What other use cases, or do you want to elaborate on specific use cases around design and why that would be beneficial for uses in XR?
Yeah, I mean, for really any kind of design, and especially, so there's sort of the interdepartmental design, like in automotive, for example, where they literally used to make a physical clay model, and they would ship it to like the other design teams in Asia if they were in the U.S. or in Europe, and it was the most unwieldy, just crazy way of doing business. And so that was sort of an obvious one. But I think part of the other is not just around design. It's about visualization, right? And you, for example, I don't know if you've ever, redecorated your house or, gone to a model or, going to a store and seeing something in the store and trying to figure out how it looks in your house is really challenging, especially when you start adding like for like you're trying to do a whole room, right? And so this is just a basic example, but just being able to see how it looks and be able to see it in your environment, right? And it's really about just creating a level of understanding that's seamless, that is hard for people to extrapolate and to see around the corners, essentially. And so I think that's one of the aspects. And visualization takes so many forms. Like also think about data, right? Visualizing data. We still visualize data even in a 3D environment in these kind of 2D constructs or 3D constructs that we've been ingesting through a 2D screen. And so what does it look like to stand in the middle of data? And I'm not talking about pods with all, the way we do now, like the pods with all the little, it's like developers can see that because they think in terms of kind of, branching code, branching narrative. But the average person doesn't necessarily think that way. So there's a new visual language that will emerge around visualizing massive sets of data from within and organically working with data. And we haven't even invented that. And this is where, moving away from, again, that incremental optimization, which is important, but we already know that the technology can do that, and really starting to be much more kind of global. I call it actually volumetric thinking. It's one of the workshops that we run. It's really looking at, where do we want to go? It's being proactive instead of reactive. It's designing, it's envisioning instead of predicting. And that's a different mindset. And I think all of us should be doing this on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned data because, in terms of a use case, I don't know why this hasn't been explored as much as it has or has not been, but every Fortune 5 company has data that they would like to reinterpret or at least visualize in a different way to understand it better. And there's companies like Flow Immersive who I'm actually advising on, who actually takes incredible amounts of data, and they're able then to portray it in headset. And they're also incorporating Gen AI, where you can now ask the AI to then visualize it in a bar graph, or no, change that into a radial graph, and then let me know how to visualize this set of data and exclude this type of data. And I really do believe that's going to be a strong use case, especially when these companies want to understand, like, hey, what do we do when we have all this information and how do we present it? Data visualization is key. And I think design is key. I think, what other use cases does this unlock now that we have generative AI into the mix,
Well, I think,
and XR?
yeah, all of it. Well, we're all now lifelong learners, whether we like it or not. And so this notion of, going to kindergarten and elementary school and middle school and high school, and then going to college, a 4-year college, I think those days are kind of over. I think we'll still go to school, but I think we're going to start doing these short, sharp shocks of learning that are much more of a kind of a building blocks or sort of passport to where we want to go in our careers, right? And because technology is moving so quickly and the world is moving so quickly, and we have some significant problems to solve, and I use Kevin Kelly's term protopian, still very positive about the future, but we have a lot of global challenges we need to overcome, and the technology can do that, but we all need to engage. And so I think from a learning perspective, to not only allow us to continue to elevate our careers and our knowledge, but to do it in a way that we haven't really been able to do before in adaptive learning, right? We've had this concept of adaptive learning where you take into consideration one's learning style. Some people are visual learners, some people spatial learners, some people are linear. There's multiple Howard Gardner's 7 intelligences. There's 13, there's 100. It depends on who you talk to. But we do know that we all learn differently. And so what if we were given information in the best way for us to be able to absorb it and retain it and then apply it? And I think that is going to be one of the incredible benefits of really elevating us as humans in a way that we want, right? So it doesn't feel like work. I mean, I don't know about you, but I wasn't super psyched to get up at 6:30 every morning and go trundling off to school and listen to someone drone on for 6
Oh,
hours.
that sounds so fun.
Yeah. And
Right.
so, but now we can be in these like fantastical environments, and we can be led by our curiosity, and we can learn very specifically the way that we learn, and learn what we want to learn, right? And the way we want to learn it. So that is really exciting to me. I think that's also just an industry in general that is ripe to be turned on its head, along with data visualization.
Yeah. I think AI, and you've heard this before, that AI needs XR because XR can be able to be the interface for AI. Like, it helps AI be visualized. And you touched upon training and education, where education just needs to be disrupted because it's not very fun and not very immersive. And now we have something like ChatGPT, and we have affordable headsets where you can now empower, in a digital AI to then be some of your favorite, you know, people in the world that can educate you about some specific thing. I've heard like Mark Andreessen said, oh, you can actually learn about the Civil War from Abraham Lincoln, and
Yeah.
being able to have, a virtual Abraham Lincoln giving you the rundown and teaching you about the Civil War, and being interactive too. You can ask questions and get that type of feedback. And I think that's going to be so powerful. What other things as a futurist do you think are going to be Amy's predictions in the next 5 years?
Well, I think if I wake up and I get to be czar of all things tomorrow, um, I would hope that we create a completely different economy around this digital landscape, because that is very exciting to me. This idea that there's a different value system that can run in parallel in this digital landscape that allows really everybody to play in the global economy through these microtransactions, and partly through what you're talking about, this ownership of digital assets. But instead of owning and then locking it down and it's mine, how do you own something and then let somebody kind of riff on top of that? So, really thinking of an economy that is expansive and infinite, as opposed to based on scarcity. Like, everything we think we know is a construct, and time, color, space, I mean, all of it. And so, we have this incredible opportunity to reinvent ourselves. So let's go back to like when we were 5, and be like, oh, what are you going to do today? You're like, well, obviously I'm going to ride my purple giraffe Fred, and we're going to go to the moon, and we're going to, pick some money off the money tree, and we're going to go to the candy store, and, we're going to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And as long as I'm back by 6, mom doesn't get mad. Like, we can dream that up in a heartbeat, because we live in this kind of semi fantasy state. But then you add experience to that, to real fantasy, and you start to be able to have the underpinnings of a new way of solving problems, and a new mindset, and a new way of looking at things. And not to cause an undue revolution, but we can do better than what we've done. And so let's use the technology to help us get there.
Yeah, I'm totally with that. I think that also reminds me of kind of this critique from Philip Rosedale, who was the founder of Second Life, and he wrote this Medium article that I read today. And I've known Philip for a long time, and he was making a critique on Sam Altman's, the founder of ChatGPT, his new token called World Token, I
Yeah,
believe.
WorldCoin.
And World Token, WorldCoin, empowers you to, first of all, you can earn WorldCoin by scanning your eye, because, the problem with blockchain, with a lot of technology, a lot of it's run by bots. And, the whole premise of WorldCoin is that we want to authenticate everyone at being human with their eye data. And so they're paying people, I don't know if it's $20 or $50 to give that up.
Like, where's that going?
Which I don't know if that, yeah, where's that going? I mean, I guess you're then identifying that this person is a person. And, I'm sure there's a tie-in. That was Philip's big critique, like, hey, that's universal basic income, but we can do it better. And that's something that Philip Rosedale is trying to change right now. He's actually, that's his, new project that he's working on. What do you think about like dystopian ideals or critiques about technology when it comes to that? And what do you think about WorldCoin?
Well, I think that's a look. I think it's coming from the right place, but we have to create the mechanism for proof of humanity, one, and then self-sovereign identity, self-sovereign data. But we have to do it, right? It's going to be work, but we have to. I think that we need to build the interface and have our own kind of personal AIs that helps us manage our own data. And that is also going to be one of the underpinnings. In fact, I talked to Philip about this. I went and sat, and he's taken over the old Second Life office now. And the idea is that we need to be able to prove who we are. We might present in multiple different ways, in these virtual landscapes. But we need to be able to have it tied to a core identity. But that core identity has to kind of either live on our own kind of managed blockchain. We need to have some protections, and we need AI to help us manage that. And so that the flows don't necessarily tie our identity to any of our personas or avatars in the digital landscape, but that there is a mechanism for proof. And then once you've solved that, then I think we start to be able, and look, I think that that's one way of doing it. I'm a little bit nervous about, first of all, I'm a little bit nervous about Sam Altman just having his little fingers and toes into literally everything that we do. And so I don't, he's become his own centralized network. Essentially.
Yes, that
Um,
is true. Well, and then he's also, don't forget, he was at Y Combinator, and
I
like
know, I
look
know.
at his reach through all the startups, that he's
Yeah.
helped,
Yeah, I mean, he's
incubate
going
and
to be,
grow in the
he's one of
last,
he's
two
one of the
decades.
villains
Yeah.
from like all the '70s movies, like at the very top of the building, like like petting his cat, going, "I'm just reasonable." But no, but I think as consumers, we've got to figure out, we've got to be a little bit more demanding. Like GDPR happened because there was this outcry, but we were educated that, we started to realize like, oh, we're just, being completely manipulated by, social media and news outlets. But we have to be willing to do the work. Otherwise, we're just going to become these digital lab rats. And the problem with eye tracking and all this biometric data that we're going to start to get, and EEG data, I mean, that is medical data. And, we react in really nuanced ways that could be leveraged against us in ways that we're not even conscious of. And so we need that data so we can understand ourselves better. And then we can decide, who gets what data when. Um, and we should have a network information construct where it's like something gets assigned a time to live. You go to the dentist, they don't need your entire medical history, but dentistry, has been linked. Certain procedures have been linked to people who have heart murmurs. So maybe you give them that piece of data, and it lasts for 48 hours on their system, and then they don't have the onus of protecting it. We know where our data is, and our data is protected because the plethora of data that's going to come off of these smart materials and all of the sensors and the brain data, that is a tremendous amount of data, and we need to start looking at ways that we can manage it. And it's going to be really important for each of us to have our own kind of personal trusted AI mechanism to do that.
That's right. A trusted AI mechanism that also looks out for you as the individual. Like there is all this data. It's all your data. How is that being protected when you're giving it to a centralized entity like a corporation? And that was the ethos that got me really excited about Web3. You cannot have the metaverse unless you actually own it. However, like we had mentioned, once there's so much value into the mix, you're going to get bad actors coming, from all nooks and crannies.
Yeah. And
Um,
really, is
in
Snoop Dogg
term,
really running his world in Sandbox or Decentraland or wherever he is? Like, really, is that
oh,
really?
I'm sure it's
No,
probably his
it is not. It is his
people.
assistant.
Yeah, and who's in Sandbox today, anyways? There's maybe like 5 people right now in Sandbox. That's interesting. You mentioned Sandbox. What do you think about Sandbox? I mean, that's a great one because Sandbox was one of those like small I mean, sorry, like one of those big explosions from a small company that came out of nowhere that said, hey, we're building the metaverse. And very similar to a lot of metaverses that were being built, there just wasn't a lot of traction. But then they were able to generate a lot of buzz around their token, which then became very speculative. And again, bringing bad actors and not really in it for the projects. But they did a great job to get celebrities like Snoop, companies, sponsors, Adidas, etc. But then there's nobody. And was that also kind of part of your thesis of why the metaverse is dead? Like a lot of these projects that come out as metaverse just kind of end up being flat?
Well, and I'm
Or do you
actually,
think it's flat?
well, I do. I think it's also too early. I think that I'm actually, I know Sebastian Bourget, the founder, and I think he's an incredible CEO. And I think he really has a great vision. He's very focused also on, creators and creating these amazing environments. I've been pretty vocal about not buying into the kind of digital landscape real estate scarcity model. I think that like Decentraland's doing something interesting where they're giving a 10 by 10 plot to creators. They're just giving it to them for free, and then they build these spectacular landscapes. I think this is in an effort to kind of draw people in. But the thing is that it's almost like these environments are too broad. We kind of need the real world with the digital overlay before we need a fully immersive environment. And I think there's going to be room for all of it. And I think we will get to the point of having really what is a spectrum of reality. So I don't even think, first of all, I don't even think the word metaverse is going to stick, because we don't talk about, going on the World Wide Web or the interwebs anymore.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
and, and
Cyberspace.
yeah, and really you're just going to move between, real life, augmented reality, kind of mixed reality, and virtual reality, and back again. And it's going to be seamless. And again, it's going to be in the same way that maybe one day you use your smart device for one thing, you use your laptop for another, you use a workstation for another, you'll watch something on your television. It's just like you're using whatever device in whatever reality is right for whatever you want to be doing. But God, both Sandbox and Decentraland, even though again there's sort of this greed component to it, God bless them, because we will have these fully blown kind of virtual environments that are fantastical. Our brains just can't draw a line from here to there. Like we get in there, we're like, whoa, what do we do now? And so you look at Roblox, and Roblox is trying to bridge that gap, but that demographic is like 8 to 13 on their best day. They say, all right, 16. Okay, that's crazy. 16. Wow. It's still a very specific demographic. And that's a gaming environment. We have to move past gaming and entertainment. That's a hook. But that is a subsector of, the world. And so, it's just like, it's a long evolution, but that's what's cool about it. We can play, right? I think everybody should get a functional knowledge of whatever technology they think is the coolest and just start building stuff. Like coding is the new math. Like if you don't know how to code, learn, make stuff, make anything. This is where we're going, because there will be a creator economy, and we get to say what it is. This is this rare moment in time where we get to not predict the future. We get to make it. But we've got to make
That's
an effort.
right.
We've
And
got to do something better.
I agree. And I think your idea of creator economies, I really think that's universal basic income. I think everyone will be a creator with this technology. They'll be able to share things that make them human, that things that they previously can get done will probably be automated, um, outside of probably essential workers that need physical dexterity, etc. That was cool. In terms of the next steps for Amy Peck and the Amy Peck Show, what do you got planned? What's coming on the horizon for you?
Wow. Well, I'm pretty much living on a plane these days, 0 bedroom, 6 bath on United at 30,000 feet. So I'm headed back to the East Coast soon. I'm spending a lot of time in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which it has really changed a lot over the last 5 years. I have had mixed reviews when I tell people, but there's so much change happening there, and change doesn't happen in a vacuum. So I love to go. I love to meet people from there. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of innovation. And there really is a world view. Like, I think that there's an opportunity for all of us to, like, we have to build this global landscape somehow. Like we have to all take a step forward and start looking at some of the, major challenges we have, and that will allow us, if we can really overcome some of the environmental challenges, and we look at the SDG goals, and how do we get to universal basic income, and how do we address global accessibility. Let's all point in that direction, and I think we will be amazed if we really start to develop a global culture. That I think that is the nature of the DAO, but the DAOs are becoming exclusionary in their own right. What does a truly kind of inclusive global network look like, of people kind of facing the same direction, care about similar things, but yet also celebrate their differences? That's the piece that we're really missing, is looking at others and going, wow, that's cool, instead of going, well, you're an idiot because you think that. And there's this lack of respect and joy about what other cultures bring to the world. And so yeah, we need a mindset shift. I think we all probably just need to go into VR and do like an hour of Trip a day, TRIPP, an AR company.
Yeah, I love Trip.
And she also, by the way, I don't know if she still does a lot, because I haven't been in a while, but she narrated a lot of those. So for anyone who does not know, Trip is a beautiful meditation app. It's available on the Quest. And in the early days, some of the early experiences, she has the most beautiful voice, and she narrates. So you go in, you see this incredibly evocative environment, and then it's her voice, and she's talking you through. I can't do it because I have a terrible voice, but it is. I highly recommend it. You got to go. We all need that. Just like, let's just chill out for a little bit and then go tackle the big problems.
I'm a big fan of meditation and meditation in XR. Couldn't agree more.
It's the best.
How can people find you?
I'm best on LinkedIn, and then on the company formerly known as Twitter.
Too bad they got to tear down that big sign that they had on top of the building. That's very
I
topical.
know,
But
I know, I know.
Elon had put the big X
That
sign,
was,
and they
yeah,
just
that
took
was
it
kind
down
of close to
today.
her old office a little bit.
Anything else you want to share with people here in terms of anything you got going on, but you already told them where to check you out, but anything else you'd like to share as last parting words?
Well, if you are a developer and you're into XR and you build something really, really cool, tell me about it. I'd love to know, because I
Fantastic. You heard it first.
love developers, and I love ISVs. Like, they're the ones making my life better.
Awesome. Amy, thank you so much for being a guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you, David. It's great to see you.
Great to see you. Bye. Yeah, I'm gonna stop it right here.
Fabulous.